Good morning, students. So, students, till now we have completed 3 units, that is Unit 1, Unit 2 and Unit 3. Now, let's start the Unit 4 of the subject History, and the topic, the chapter that we will be taking today, it is Nationalism in India. So, this chapter is presented by me, Ekta Malhi, and Akshita Saxena. So let's move on. Let's know what are the themes and different subtopics in this chapter that we will be studying. So let's start. We will talk about the First World War in this chapter. So we will talk about the First World War in this chapter. Then we will talk about incident of Jallianwala Bagh massacre. Then we will talk about Khilafat movement. Then we will talk about some of the very important movements in our freedom struggles, like the non-cooperation movement and the civil disobedience movement. We will also talk about the famous Salt March or Dandi March of Mahatma Gandhi. Not only that, we will also know about the things that created a sense of oneness among the Indian people, or you can say that created a sense of collective belonging among the Indian people. So these are some of the subtopics in this chapter that we will cover. Now let's start with some simple questions that I want to ask from you, and I think that you will be able to answer these things very easily. So let's start. How many siblings do you have? I think most of us have siblings. Maybe you have a brother or a sister. Am I right or not? So maybe a brother or a sister. Do you love your siblings? I do. I think most of us, we love our siblings. So let me ask you another question now. How you and your siblings are different from each other? Can you find some differences among you and your siblings? Try to see them. What do you find that is not common among you and your sibling? Maybe the complexion. Am I right or not? Like the complexion of your skin, or can I say habits too? Like smaller habits, something that you like but your sibling doesn't like. That thing also happen or not? Yes. So let's talk about other things. Maybe preferences. Some things that you might prefer but your siblings might not prefer. Am I right or not? Then your gender is also different. Maybe you are a boy and your sibling is a girl, or you are a girl and your sibling is a boy. It can also happen. You might have a brother or sister. Many other things are also there, like interests, preferences, interests, habits, or nature. How you behave in a certain circumstance and how your sibling behaves in a certain circumstance. So these are the differences that we see among us and our siblings. Am I right or not? So let's move on to another question. So next I want to ask you, do you fight with each other at home? I think most of us fight with our siblings, whether we have a brother or a sister. Sometimes we fight verbally also by saying bad things, saying hurtful things to each other. Maybe sometimes we use our hands or fist fights also. Have you done that, all that WWE fighting with your brother or sister at home? I think I have. We all enjoy that or not? So I think most of us will answer in yes, that yes, we have fought with each other in the past. Now let me ask you another thing. So what will be your reaction if a neighbor comes up and beats your sibling? Now you already told me that you and your sibling always fight with each other, but let me ask this from you, that even though you fight with each other like in a friendly way, but what if an outsider or a person who is a neighbor, he comes to your home and tries to beat your sibling or you? What will be your reaction? What will be your feeling? Will you tell me? Yes, you might feel angry. It might be quite hurtful. Yes. Tell me other things also. Yes, the feeling of revenge. That how can you touch my sibling or me even? Not only that, maybe you will want to fight that person. Now tell me one thing. How will that fight be in nature? Like, will it be like you fight with your sibling, or will it be a serious fight in which you actually want to throw that person out of your home, or you actually want to hurt that person? It will be a friendly fight? No, most of the time. Yes. So let me ask you another thing also now. What if that neighbor tries to control your household? He comes into your house, he tries to beat you up, he tries to beat your sibling, tries to harm your parents, or tries to control your household. Then what will be your reaction? Will you let him do that or not? Yes, nobody among us will like that if any outsider comes in our area and tries to control our household by taking all the decisions by himself. We will not like that, or not like that completely. So next thing, what will you try to do then? So first of all, you will be filled with rage. Then you will try to first convince that person that get out of my home. Then if that convincing will be successful, then that person goes out. But what will happen if that person is not ready to leave your household? Then what will you do? Then you have two ways. Yes, tell me the two ways. Yes, you will try to inform the authorities, or can I say peaceful way? What is the other way? Yes, you will try to physically remove that person. Yes, that will be a non-peaceful way. Am I right or not? Exactly. So can you tell me, or can you figure out any period in our history when some kind of similar situation was happening in our country, in a situation when Indian people were filled with rage? They tried to convince someone for something. First, they try to do it in a very peaceful way, but later, when it was not completely successful, then they tried to make some groups which were militant in nature also. Can you figure out what was the time period when all of this was happening? Yes, exactly. We can say it was the period of Indian freedom struggle, in which we tried peacefully also, and we tried in a non-peaceful manner also, because the Britishers, who were the outside power, they tried to control our household, or you can say our country, for a very long time. We were fed up and we wanted to take the control back in our hands. Very nice. You have answered very, very well. Now I want to ask one more thing, just like I asked you, that will you still resist or fight together? You and your sibling most of the time fight, but if any other person comes, will you resist to fight, or you will fight? Yes, we will fight. Our ways can be different, like peaceful and non-peaceful, but most of us will not like the prospect of anybody coming in our home and taking the control in his hands. So now let's talk about some of the topics that are related to this chapter, since we have now joined the points and we understand that the time period we are talking about in our Indian freedom struggle, it is the time period when Indians came together with each other and tried to take the control back in their hands, or you can say tried to push the outsiders out of the country, and to again, you can say, be a self-sufficient, be a self-governed nation. So this topic or this chapter actually talks about the time period of the First World War. Will you tell me what was the time period of the First World War? Yes, please. In the 9th class chapter, Hitler, you have learned about it. Yes, exactly. This was the time of 1914 to 1918. This was the time period when First World War was being fought. So now tell me this thing. Do you remember who were the powers who were fighting in the First World War? Yes, on one side there were Allied powers, and on the other side there were, yes, Central powers. Very nice. Who won the First World War? Yes, Allied powers won the First World War. So just like that, we can say that the First World War broke out in 1914, and later India got dragged into the war. Now ask yourself, why India was compelled to join the war? Who will tell me? Yes, India was a colony of the Great Britain at that time. What's a colony? Yes, a nation or an area that is in complete control of a foreign power. We can use the term colony for that. Am I right or not? So India was the colony of Great Britain. Britain used to control us in every way, whether that was economically, whether that was socially, whether that was politically. India was in complete submission to Great Britain at that time. So obviously, Great Britain was one of the Allied powers. It wanted to fight in the First World War, so it also dragged the different colonies who were being controlled by it at that time. And India was the biggest colony of Britishers, so it got dragged into the war, even though it had no direct connection with the First World War. So let's move on. You can see here, there is a picture here in which you can see the different World War fighters are there, and they are fighting different soldiers. You can see different sort of terrain is there in which people are coming from the one side with the weapons in their hand, and other people are running away. You can see all these things, and in the background the European landscape is there. So the First World War was fought on many turfs, but Europe was the main area where this war actually took place. Now, so basically First World War is known as a fight to make the world safe for democracy. Now you might be thinking that why it was a fight to make the world safe for democracy. So the reason was two powers were fighting, Allied and Central. And let me tell you, the Central powers, the countries which consisted of Central powers like Germany, like Turkey, all these countries, they were not in the support of the democratic ideas. And if you say on the other side, the countries which were part of Allied powers like Britain, it was a constitutional monarchy. Then on the other side, USA, it is the oldest democracy. France, it was a pioneer of liberal ideas in Europe from a very long time. So the kind of ideology that these countries believed in, it was completely democratic. But on the other side, the kind of ideology in which people of Germany and other Central powers believed in, it was not democratic at all. So that is why we can say World War First was a fight to make the world safe for democracy. Now the next thing, in First World War there was a loss of life at a huge scale, because not only the Allied powers and the Axis power, they fought in the First World War using their manpower, but they also dragged the different colonies. Like India, at that time, India had to supply soldiers, India had to supply cattle so that the soldiers can eat. As you know, in foreign countries, meat consumption is their main staple diet, in which they are mostly not vegetarians. So not only that, not only the loss of life, but the uh, loss of money and different kind of assets was also there, because India had to send rifles, India had to stitch garments, many different things were done by India at that time. But first and foremost, the loss of life was at a very huge scale. The loss of life was such, you can say, such horrible at that time, that the women which were earlier not part of the workforce, they were mostly they were mostly giving their services in the household, taking care of their families. After the First World War, the women had to actually come into the production, work in the industries. It also gave them a lot of freedom. But you can just imagine that if the women have to come and work in the workforce, it means the men who fought in the First World War, the death percentage was quite high at that time. So let's move on to the next thing. Now let's talk about what were the effects of First World War on India. Till now we talked about how a world war actually was quite horrible on the worldwide scale. Now let's talk about the specific effects, or you can say the specific repercussions that came on India due to the World War first. Now let's talk about first of all the economic repercussions or economic problems that arose in India due to the First World War. First of all, the prices doubled. Now you might be thinking that India was so far away. India was not directly fighting in the First World War. Then why the prices doubled at that time? Beta, have you seen when any kind of problem comes, like right now we are fighting through the coronavirus disease, and you can see that when there is a lack of supply of something in our neighborhood or any area, if that thing is quite less in numbers in the market, the price of that thing goes up. So if supply is less, then what? Then the demand. Then what happens? Most of the time, the price of that thing goes up. And now you might be thinking that why the supply of normal things was quite less in the First World War. So the reason was, but as you know, if any country is fighting a very big war, then what will happen? The normal production of the things. What is the normal production? Like we can say the things of household use, है ना? Or you can say the things like luxury items. These things are not manufactured at that time, because at that time what is the main and important thing that should be manufactured is the war materials, because the country is going through a war. So different war materials are only made at that time. And what are the different war materials? Like you can say weapons are there, then you can say for the soldiers the blankets are there, then not only blankets, the uniforms which they wear and then fight in the war, all of these things. Not only that, cotton, because band-aids are there, cotton band-aids, because soldiers most of the time they get injured. So all of these war materials, their production is done on a very huge scale if any country is going through a war. And because First World War was such a huge war, so India and the different colonies were fighting. You can say they were fighting in the First World War, and they focused mostly on making the war materials. And due to that, if most of the industry is busy in making these, obviously the supply of things like household items and things like luxury items will be suffered. So if it is suffered, then there will be a lack of these things in the market. And as I told you, if there will be a lack of supply, then what will happen? the people will demand the thing, but that thing will not be supplied, and then the price will go up. Let me explain you it, you can say nicely, in a very simple way. So suppose you want to get a pen. You go to a shop, and what happens? You say to the shopkeeper that I want to take the pen right now, and at the same time many people come up and they say I also want the pen. Shopkeeper suppose have only 2 pens, and 10 people, 2 pens he has, and 10 people come to take that pen. Then what will be the shopkeeper doing at that time? He will say that I will give these 2 pens to those people who will give me more money than the original price. So the pen that is normally 5 rupees only, the shopkeeper will try to sell it in 50 rupees. You might have heard of all these things, like during the Notebandi or the demonetization time, what was happening? The cash was not available with the people at that time. So what the other people were doing? They were trying to give you 450 rupees. They were trying to give you 450 rupees if you give them the older notes of 500 rupees. Why? Because the people who wanted to exchange their notes, their demand was very high, and the actual notes which were less in the amount of 100, which were less than 100 rupees, the actually which we say that the open money or the money that is less than 100 rupees, that was quite less at that time, and because the use of money or the cash money was quite less in the market, so people tried to take the price up in which they will give you their service or they will exchange the money for you. So just remind this, that whenever demand is more than supply, then the prices goes up in the market. And because at that time the household items, they were quite less in number, their numbers were quite less, so the shopkeepers or the normal you can say the businessmen, they tried to double the prices at that time. So this was the first thing that happened due to the First World War. Now, second thing, huge increase in defense expenditure. Will anybody tell me what is defense? Yes, defense means when we try to shelter our country, when we try to save our country, we try to you can say we try to make our country impenetrable, or we try to save our country by the outsiders, and we use different things for that. Like we have in defense expenditure, we use the money for weapons, because the soldiers, they save our country, they shelter our country, they give lives for our country, so they must have weapons so that they can fight the invaders or the outsiders. Then uniforms, not only that, different things like tanks, different things like you can say fighter jets, all of these things, not only that, the salary which the army officers get or army people get, not only that, different kind of expenses like the transport, because they have to go from one area to another. So different kind of and equipments, the different defense equipments, like you might have seen things like that walkie-talkie or satellite phones, all of these things are new, but at that time also different equipments were used at that time. So all of these things, they come in the defense expenditure, because the government has to spend a huge amount of money for all these things. And around the First World War, India was dragged into the First World War, so India also had to incur, or you can say India also had to spend so much money in the First World War preparation. So as the defense expenditure was becoming quite high at that time, so the government, it also needed more money. Now tell me, how does the government makes money for itself? Who will tell me? Yes, the government takes the money by taking the taxes. You are absolutely right. Government makes the money by taxes that it takes from the public. So, next thing, the taxes which were taken by the government at that time, they were increased because due to the participation in the First World War, the existent amount of money that was used in governance was not enough at that time. So taxes were increased. Not only that, India took many war loans. India was indirectly part of the First World War. So on the behalf of Indian public, the Britishers, they took war loans from other countries so that they can use that money in fighting the First World War. So these things were done at that time. Not only that, custom duties. So custom duty, now you might have listened about these things, like when any person has to import something or export something, they pay the tax to the government, that is known as custom duties. They were also increased at that time. So these were the different economic bad effects that came on India due to the participation in the First World War. Now let's talk about some of the social things that happened in India or that took place in India due to the effects of the First World War. First of all, forced recruitment. Can you tell me what is recruitment? Yes, recruitment means when you get admitted in army or when the army takes you and makes you part of their force, then that is known as recruitment. You might have seen in our area, like the army area of army camp area, you might have seen many individuals, they try to run very fastly, or they try to give their medical test. Yes, that is for recruitment in army. You might have seen the recruitment advertisement in the TV also, like come to join Indian army, it is quite good. So all of these things are done. But during the First World War, India was dragged in the war, and Indian public, the males especially, they were forced to join the army to fight in the First World War at that time. And tell me one thing, if you are forced to do something, how would you feel? Will you like it or will you not? Yes, we do not like when anybody forces us to do something. So Indian people got very angry due to this forced recruitment done by Britishers in India at that time. Now the second thing that happened, that was famines and epidemic. Can you tell me what are famines? Yes, when there is a shortage of food, then that situation creates a famine in which people are not able to get the food and they die due to the result of that. Now you might be thinking, ma'am, why was there is a shortage of food? The reason was crop failure that happened during that time. As you know, India is a monsoon based area completely. If the monsoon is not good and any kind of adverse weather condition comes, the crops fail, the farmers, they are completely distraught, completely destroyed, all their money, all their you can say the hard work that they do, that completely get wasted. And in those years this happened, and when crops will not be there, how will the people get the food in the market? So there was a shortage of food, and due to that famine occurred, and many people lost their lives due to that famine. Not only that, when the Indian soldiers, they went to fight the First World War, a new kind of epidemic. Now let's talk about what is epidemic first. So epidemic is a kind of disease that encompasses or that spreads over a very huge chunk of population. Like nowadays, haven't you heard about coronavirus? You might have learnt, or you might have seen this word epidemic coming again and again. Epidemic, pandemic. So right now, coronavirus is spread on most of the countries in the world, and at that time there was a similar epidemic that specially, you can say, damaged the soldiers fighting in the First World War, and that epidemic was known as Spanish flu at that time. Spanish flu was quite like coronavirus. The symptoms were quite similar, and the Indian soldiers who were fighting in the First World War, when they came back after the ending of the First World War in 1918, they also got infected with the Spanish flu there, and they spread the same thing in India also. So these are some of the bad effects of the First World War in India. So students, let's end here. In the next topic, we will talk about the idea of Satyagraha. Thank you so much.